Welcome back, everybody. For this second video here, I'm going to be talking about our relative practice number 2. So this one's going to be dealing with initials just the same as practice number 1, but this time we're going to be talking about arcs. So for arcs, for this video, I'm going to be talking about I's and J's and R values, the radius values. So here, I'm going to switch to a second into my grid space, and then we're going to come back here to NC Viewer, and we'll kind of type up the whole thing. So going back to my note sheet here, you can see that I have D and then I have C. So now I have an S on the original sketch because this paper only goes to 3, and I extended it in class to 3.5. So we'll talk about that here a little bit at the end of the video. But for the first thing, D and C, we'll talk about this. So now for A, this is still the same thing as before. We're doing that little bit of that absolute cheat sheet at the beginning to get to point A, but then from A to B, B to C, C to D around the arc, that's all going to still be relative code. So going to A, again, I count my grids. I got 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to be 0.5, and then I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces up. This is going to be 0.625. So on my A coordinate, it's going to be 0.5, Y 0.625. Now A to B, I'm going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in my Y direction, up and down. So that's going to be 1.0, and then my X, 0. Moving from B to C, I'm going to have, again, going kind of quadrant 1. So I'm going to go in a positive X direction. So I'm going to have 1, 2 grid spaces. It's going to be 0.25 for my X, 0 for my Y. Now, here is the kind of interesting part of this. So from get to C to D, we're already at C. This is going to be, again, our 0, 0. So if I kind of move back to the sheet that I had before, so we can use this line, that's fine. So if I'm over up here at C, I need to go down to D. I'm going to have kind of like this arc moving around, and then there's a point over here. So this from here to here is 8 grid spaces. So that is 1.0. To get halfway, I got 0.5 from C to the center, or the center to D. My radius here is 0.5. Now, what we're doing is something called I's and J's. This is totally acceptable if we want to do an R, and I can show you an NC Viewer what that looks like too. But for the same thing, we're going to use I's and J's for this demo specifically. So I's and J's. I and J, this is talking about an X and a Y value of the center of your arc. So X is I is the X coordinate of the center. J is the Y coordinate of the center. So if I'm going from C to D around this arc, so this is going to be a clockwise, this is going to be a G, 0, 2 movement. I need to then find the center of this, which is halfway down. In relative, this is actually not too complicated because we know since we're only moving in Y, we're going to have a Y value, and X is going to be pretty much 0. So for my I and J of this center point of this arc, my diameter is 1, 8 grid spaces. So half of that is 4 grid spaces. I'm going to have an X value of 0. My Y value is going to be going down 4 grid spaces. So again, each grid is 0.125. So that's going to be a negative 0.5 value. Now, moving back to my sheet here. So C to D, my D is going to be a negative 1 in the Y and a 0 in the X, because when you draw this point, again, you're still doing relative. So 0 in the X and negative 1 for the Y. My I and J, I is 0. My J is negative 0.5. I like to totally write these kind of in the drawing, helps it make it a little bit easier. So again, so from right here, if we're using quadrant 1, 2, 3, and 4, we're going down negative Y. X is irrelevant because we're only moving in one direction going down. So 0, negative 0.5. And then I'll show you how we do this in NC Viewer. But before we do that, we need to go from D to E, which is a negative X because we're going in the left direction. 0 for Y. So we have a 0 for the Y, negative 0.25 to wrap off the letter D. So now, going back to NC Viewer here. So I completely have DCS. This is all kind of good. I'm gonna go back to this NC Viewer file here. I'm gonna delete this, add some new code. So now let's go ahead and see where we're at. Let's plot this. So everything after this line, I'm gonna delete. So this code is pretty much the same as just before, kind of in the first relative video. We made the box around, and then now we're gonna go ahead and make that letter. So you can see I already have an R as the radius in here, because I did that earlier, that we did on our paper. We found that the radius of our thing was 0.5, which is just half of our diameter, which was 1. But now I'm gonna switch this to I's and J's and show you how we do that. So if you watch the first video, you can see that we're going down into our piece. We're moving up to point B, over to point C, using my radius value to get to my point D, and then back to E. So this is talking about the box up here, this point A. So let me just say box. And then let me fix this one too. I'll just delete it, it'll be easier. So now this is point A. And then we have B. We have C. And then we have D. Now, you will have to put these in parentheses because it will shoot an error when we go to the machine. So let me do that real quick. So D. Now, again, we use the radius value, but let's show what I's and J's look like. So on the same line, I have x0, y -1, which was the same exact thing as our paper. Now my I value, capital I, was 0. My J value was a -0.5 because I is the X center of the arc. J is the Y of the center of the arc. Now let's go ahead. Let's say plot. So now let's delete this line too. You can see that I have this full arc from C to D. It created that arc in the clockwise rotation because this is a G02. If I do a G03, let's see what happens. So it went to the same end coordinate. That's why X and Y are very important, because it's where the arc will end. But this center point is exactly the same. I'm just telling it which direction with the G03 and the G02. So if I do G02, it will go ahead and fix itself, and then we can write that code. Then on line 60, let's say, let's do a G01. Let's put in our coordinate for E. So you have X -0.25, we have Y 0, semicolon. And then that finishes the letter. From video 1, you might know how to go up and over kind of in your G00s and then go to the next letter. So you can refer back to that video, but let me go ahead and just switch back to our paper a little bit. So again, if we're working using this sheet, let me grab a fresh one. So if these are our coordinates, again, I's and J's. So if I'm starting here, let's say this is my point A, I want to move down to point B. Another thing with I's and J's is that they have to be, your circle or arc has to be equal going left and right. So in both directions. You can't do any ellipses or anything like that. So what you would have to do is make sure you're going in X and Y in the same direction. So let's go ahead and make probably a little bit bigger arc here. So from A to B, let's just do 6 actually. So A to B, I'm going to go ahead and have this center point. So I have 3 grid spaces down. I'll do another dot over here. So now this is my arc. So my A coordinate is just my 0, 0. My B is going to be for the X, it's going to be a 0. And then for my Y, this is going to be a -0.75. For my I and my J, it's going to be, I is going to be same thing for the X, 0. J is going to be pretty much half of that 0.75, which is 0.375, 3/8 of an inch. So -0.375. So if I was actually going to write this on a true line of code, I would do X 0, y negative 0.75, I 0. I'll put that through, so that signifies 0. Then j negative 0.375. Then you do that semicolon. You would have your G02 all the way in front because this is a clockwise, this is a clockwise rotation. So G02, X0, Y negative 0.75, I0, J negative 0.375. Now, let's say we're going to do a G03. So G03, let me switch this back. G03 goes in counterclockwise. Oops, sorry. It goes this way. This is counterclockwise, G03. G02, clockwise. So now, you could totally do an S that's actually just a G03 to G02 or vice versa. So let's do a G03 now. So if I'm starting here at my A point, let's say, let's do like a little bit bigger, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So in the center we have 5, 3, 4, 5. From here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're gonna go in this direction now. So this is a G03. So we're done with this first line. So this next line for over here, the bigger arc, it's gonna be a G03. From A to B, we're gonna have same thing. X is gonna be 0. Y is gonna be a negative. We have 10 spaces, which is negative 1.25. My I and J. I is also going to be the same thing, 0, because we're moving nowhere in the X. J is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so negative 6.25. Oh, negative 0.625. And the way I would write this is I would do from A to B, I would do a G03, X0, Y, negative 1.25, I 0, and then J negative 0.625 semicolon. So J03 is for this bigger arc, J02 is for this bigger arc. Now, be the same way on if you're doing arcs, let's say, kind of in the Y direction. So if I was A, I was B, this direction with my arrows, this is a counterclockwise. So this would be a G03. So from A to B, I have 4 spaces. So in my X from A to B, my X is 0.5, my Y is 0. My I is going to be from center from A to B. So my I is going to be 2 grid spaces to the right, so a positive X, 0.25. My J is going to be a 0. So basically, we're flipping when you do a horizontal curve and using relative, your Y is going to be 0, J is going to be 0. And when you're doing a vertical kind of curve here, like we did before, I is 0, X is 0. So for this one, I would do a G03, X 0.5, Y 0, I is 0.25, and then J is 0. So this line here is matching up with these kind of markings here. Sorry if that was tilted the whole time. Now, last thing. Now, I could totally use I's and J's, right? Now, if I wanted to be a little bit simpler, I could totally do a radius or just an R. So I could totally wipe out my I's and J's and just put R. Now, again, the diameter from A to B is just center to center. That's 0.5. That's 4 grid spaces. Half of that from the center to the edge, radius 0.25. So I could have done a G03, X 0.5, Y 0, radius 0.25, semicolon. This is how you do R's. This is how you do I's and J's. So R's are a little bit easier than I's and J's, but I's and J's will really help you get a deeper understanding of where the center point is and kind of show you which direction you're going around. So for this, again, this activity practice number 2, you're going to have in your NC viewer 3 different letters, 2 with curves, or if you want all 3 with curves, and then have your code present, have your graphic printed, and then also have that paper copy of this showing your I's and J's, X and Y coordinates. And don't forget, you're gonna have to do a table showing where each letter goes. So just like this sheet that we showed earlier, you will have to have this layout with these going down the side as well. So hopefully this video helping you with your I's and J's for your relative code.